Hey everyone, this is Mike from Mike's Do Yourself. Today I want to show you how to do rear brake replacement on a 2009 Chevy Silverado. And after you get your tire jacked up and your wheel off, go ahead and take your brake drum off. And I'm using 2 bolts in the holes in the drum itself and just moving them in a little bit by little bit to get that drum off. Now once you take your brake drum off, you'll have to inspect it just to make sure that there's no big grooves in it, no divots or any kind of issues. If it looks fairly smooth and you haven't had it turned more than once or twice, you should be able to have it turned. And what they'll do, they'll just machine it, make it a smooth surface again, and it depends on how much of this is left. So if there's a lot left, there's a good chance that you'll be able to have it resurfaced. Now what I ended up doing, I went ahead and bought a whole kit, so I'm just going to replace it with a new one. And if this has any kind of film on it, you'll want to clean it off. Now I do have some specific tools that you might need. Brake spring tool. Now this is for your adjuster, and this will be to take your pins out right here. Now it is a good idea just to spray this with brake clean just to make sure that it is clean. Just let that dry. Now to start, you'll want to wear some safety glasses, because these springs can come off and hit you right in the face. So you really have to be careful about that. Just clean this off real quick. Now on top of the wheel cylinder, it was a little wet over here and a little wet over here. So I'm going to go ahead and replace it. The kit included the wheel cylinder also. So it should just be 2 bolts on the back side, and then the brake line that goes into here. So whenever you're removing a brake line, remember to bleed the brakes afterwards. And it is a good idea to do one side at a time. That way you can go back and look at the way the springs are positioned. And you can also take pictures too, just to see how everything looks before you start taking it all apart. Take some pictures. I don't want to do the top and the bottom. And the sides. Now some of the brake shoes may include these pins, or they may not, so you may have to move some of these pins over. And then they've come with these horseshoe clips also, so you'll want to take those off when you need to take those off. And they have these washers too that you'll have to put in, and they're bent to hold in position. And then this kit came with all the hardware, so I'm going to go ahead and just replace everything. So this is the hardware kit that came with it. Now you can use wire cutters if you're going to replace all these and just clip them, or for demonstration purpose I'm just going to remove them one at a time here. So this came off of there too, and this came off. Now once you get the top one off, you can get this one off. Now you got some movement there. And now you can take these off, the pins, the hold down pins. And that's where you would use this tool here. All I did was just put my finger on the back side to hold it in one position, and then those will come out. Now the one thing that isn't going to be replaced is your adjuster, so that's this here. So you want to make sure that that stays in good shape. And the last spring that holds all of it together is from here to here. Usually you could rotate it a little. And you can also move this adjuster all the way in too, and that sometimes helps to get that last spring out. I don't know if I'm going in or out with that, so I'm just going to pull this out of there. And then it comes out. And this will come out. So you look at the position of it. And when you start, you want to have it all the way in because it's much easier. And then if you have a little bit of grease, you can put a little bit of grease in these threads. We'll do that later. Okay, so when we flip this, you'll see the horseshoe clip and the other washer behind it. So we'll have to open that up. And you can do that with just a flathead screwdriver. Just open it up and it'll come off. Once you've got it down this far, you can go ahead and use your brake clean again and just clean out the backing plate. Okay, then you want to take a screwdriver and go ahead and open this up. And you can see that washer is facing out. So we'll go ahead and install it that same way. So you want to take the new brake pad and put it in that same hole. And then you'll just want to make sure that there's no damage to your emergency brake cable. So you just look at that, make sure there's no fraying on your cable, and your spring looks good. Okay, there's the new washer. So put that on there. And then here's the new horseshoe clip. Now, I actually like the one that came with the hardware kit better than the one that came with the brake shoes. So we'll use that one instead. Because it is a little bit wider. Now you may need to open this up a little bit and then push it back together. That is a possibility too, if you can't get it to slide down on this. I ended up just tapping it in a little bit. Got it, went into place. And then once you pull it together, it should slide back down too. There we go. And you give it a tug. Make sure it's not going to slide off. And that's the way it'll look once it gets back up in there. And we've got new rubber caps to replace, so we'll go ahead and replace those. Now, these aren't really necessary to replace if they're not worn. And then there's one up here that we'll use for the adjuster wheel. And we'll leave that one out for now in case we need to adjust it. Now to get the wheel cylinder off, you want to go ahead and remove these screws. There's one on each side. And I've got a 5/16 socket. We'll go ahead and take those off. Now you may have some brake fluid coming out when you take this out, so just change that out as quick as possible. This will take off some of the paint, so you'll want to clean it off as soon as possible with some brake clean. Once you get your wheel cylinder in, you'll just want to turn these vertically. And we can get the two hold down pins and the spring, the two springs. And the caps. So we'll start by putting this side in. And you see how that lines up with the wheel cylinder. So we'll put it in this hole here. And what you can do, you can put a little bit of grease on this point, and this point on both sides. That way it'll help the brake shoe slide better. A little bit on each one. Once you do that, put this pin through. Line it up with that hole. Put the spring on. Put this on top. And you want to line it up with however that pin is positioned. And make sure it's centered where it's across from the opening. Now you're able to move it up and down. Now for the other side, you can do the same thing. And on the bottom, just make sure it's behind this plate here. Once you get both brake shoes on, I'll go ahead and just throw a little bit of grease on this and rub it in. And that way this adjuster can move freely. The way it's positioned is here and over here. Other side. And this indentation goes out towards you. And don't forget to put this on there also. Now if you have this tool or a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, just move it upward and it'll extend the threads. Your parking brake adjuster is just touching, and with these pushed in, you can put this on. And that'll hold it right there, and then we'll get the spring. That was the blue spring, or with the new one it's the white spring. Okay, for this spring it's going to go on this clip right here for the small side, and then the large side is going to go right here on that groove. Now if you're good with this tool, you can stretch it, but you don't want to dink up your brake pad, so just be careful if you're going to try to stretch it with this tool. Okay, and then once it's on there, you can just push it with something, or do this. Now the next spring that you have is going to be this big one. Now for the next spring, it's going to be a little trickier. You're going to need to put the straight end back behind here, and then the curved end is going to go right over here. So it'll look like this when you're done with it. A little bit like fishing here. So we've got the one side on, you can see there. And now this side needs to go over to here. Now I'm going to put the bottom spring in first, just to make the top one easier. So it's going to go just like this. Now I ended up using needle nose pliers just to pull the one side over. Now the top one should be easier.
And just make sure all your springs aren't bound on anything. They look like they're where they're supposed to be. So then you can take your drum and just see if you need to adjust that parking brake adjuster any. And we need to bring it in a little. So to bring it in, we went down with it to bring it out. So we're gonna have to go up with it to bring it in. Now you can do it through the back too. Just make sure this piece is pushed out. Okay, once you think you've adjusted it enough, try to put this back on. And not yet. Now the easiest way to move your adjuster is to pull this catch back and go from the back hole and then just move it upward, and that will make it go in. So that'll push the brake shoes together, and then as soon as you're able to just barely get the brake drum on, which is right about there, you should be fine on that adjustment. Now, if this was easy to get on and off, you'll want to take this off and then move this out some. You'll want to move this out a little bit until it's just tight to get it on and off, where you have just a little bit of clearance on the brake pads, between the brake pads and the brake drum. And then after driving the vehicle and using the handbrake, it will move this out a little bit, so it will be tight against your brake drum. So even if you got it sucked in a little bit more, it's not going to be that big of a deal, because as you're adjusting the handbrake or the parking brake, this will move out a little bit at a time until it gets tight against the brake drum, or tighter against the brake drum. And then when you're done with the adjustments, go ahead and put your rubber stopper back on. That'll keep any contaminants out of there. And just inspect everything, make sure everything is tight. You want to make sure if you have any worn suspension components, say your shocks or any other issues back here, just take a look around and see if there's anything that needs to be replaced. Even if it's a brake line or something else similar, you want to replace it if it's damaged. Now when you get ready to do the other side, just remember it's the opposite. So instead of your parking brake adjuster being on this side, it's going to be on this side. So everything is going to be reversed. Well, I hope this has been helpful. This has been Mike from Mike's Do It Yourself. Thanks for watching, and good luck on your next home automotive project. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.